By 2002, Josh Homme's band Queens of the Stone Age would seemingly have been on top of the world after, of course, the wild success of their album Songs for the Deaf. However, 2 years later, they would be forced to fire their bass player, and it almost seemed like all the other members were just leaving en masse, instead focusing on their solo careers or returning to their main bands. But with the help of musicians like ZZ Top's Billy Gibbons, Tenacious D's Jack Black, Eagles of Death Metal's Jesse Hughes, and the Distillers' Brody Dale, as well as, of course, Garbage's lead singer Shirley Manson, their 4th album would eventually be completed. On this episode, we will discuss the song the band thought was stolen but appears on another album, which song appears on every single DVD ever made in the Southeast Asian region, and of course, which song was recorded in one take. In 2002, Queens of the Stone Age exploded on the scene, of course, with their record Songs for the Deaf, which featured Foo Fighters' Dave Grohl on drums and Screaming Trees' Mark Lanegan on backing vocals, in what many considered to be a supergroup type of effort. It also helped that it included the massive radio hit called No One Knows, and after a grueling couple of years on tour, Josh Homme had really made it out of the shadows of his prior band Caius, but around the corner was an unfortunate rumour regarding Nick Oliveri, and this would almost cause the band to break up. You see, the rumour that was going around for this time was that Nick had been physically abusive towards his partner at the time, and Josh approached him about it and said, and I quote here, "If I ever find out that this is true, I can't know you, man." Nick Oliveri would subsequently be fired from the band, which left Nick calling the band Queen's Light due to his powerfully heavy bass and of course his harsh vocals that added resounding power to their songs. Josh Homme even considered breaking up the band around about this stage, as rumours started to swell that even Mark Lanegan had quit due to him now focusing his attention on his solo career while this turmoil was going on. This, coupled with Dave Grohl's return to his band, of course left the positions open for a new bass player and a new drummer. The slot for drummer was an easy fit, as they added former Danzig drummer Joey Castillo to the lineup. Multi-instrumentalist Elaine Johannes would fill in the role of bass player for this album, as he had worked for the band on numerous other projects, such as on the Desert Sessions as a musician or on their Rated R album as a mixer, but this would be the only album that he would contribute to, albeit a few tracks for their next record, Era Vulgaris. In addition to this, they would also introduce Natasha Schneider into the fold as a keyboardist. Unfortunately, this would be her only contribution, as she would pass away from cancer in 2008. And with these changes, they had their core lineup, as Troy Van Leeuwen and Mark Lanegan retained their roles within the band. Chris Goss was brought back in to help produce this record with the band, and he had worked with Josh Homme on numerous occasions, even back in the day when he was with Caius. He would also provide assisting backing vocals on the songs Someone's in the Wolf, Burn the Witch, and You've Got a Killer Scene There Man. Speaking of that song, it also features other guest vocals by Shirley Manson from Garbage and Brody Dale from the Distillers. This wouldn't be the last guest appearance on the album, but I will only mention one more in this section, with Dave Catching providing additional guitar work on the song Tangled Up in the Plate. And so between May to July of 2004, they hit Sound City Recording Studios to write and produce their 4th album. Well, that's mostly true, you see, because Quoitzer had written a few of the songs prior to them coming into the recording studios, and this was found on their previous record, or rather from a previous jamming session. What I am referring to here would be known as the Desert Sessions, and if you know Queens of the Stone Age, then you will certainly know, of course, what the Desert Sessions are. Basically an amalgamation of several musicians coming together in the desert to just jam on tunes while probably high on psychedelic drugs and various other means. As you may be aware, some of the tunes that they jam on these volumes would make their way on upcoming Queitzer records, and this was no different. And as a fun fact, there are technically 3 variations of this album being released, with various different track listings and different artwork to suit. In fact, this album was supposed to include their song I Wanna Make It With You, but the master tapes were lost by the band, who pointed fingers at everyone else, unaware of their oversight. This song would later be found and added to their next album, Era Vulgaris, and perhaps describes why, of course, it sounds so different to the rest of the album. On top of this, another song was born called The Fun Machine Took a Shit and Died. However, this was left off the record and kept as a B-side. When it comes to Queens of the Stone Age, I have a strong bias for their music and the notion that they can do no wrong, because everything they do is just awesome. So with that being said, I have chosen 5 songs for this section, and if you don't like it, well, too bad, because this is my show. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. This song is not alluding to acts that may be common in Tasmania. or Australia's version of Alabama if you are a Yank, not really understanding that joke. So hold your banjos please. In fact, this song is inspired by the one and only Elvis, and of course he is a huge inspiration for Josh Homme and his musical style, namely his song of the same name that was released on his 1961 record. Homme has mentioned in an interview how he enjoyed the Elvis versions of this tune with its sort of sexual twist in its narrative, and of course implemented his own lyrics alluding of course to the little sister possibly being a prostitute. This song's main hook feels like old school Quotza with its staccato robot riffage that wouldn't be out of place off that record. In fact, when this short song was recorded for the album, the band managed to do it in one take, and thus proved with their new lineup they had confidently become a cohesive unit. From this song is that tune's rhythm section, with a tight drumming pattern that works well with that walking bass line. And in my mind, it's always felt like a tune that you could see kids playing hopscotch to if it was portrayed in a movie in a sinister way, maybe directed by Rob Zombie or something. Hey, speaking of movies, this song was also used in Peaky Blinders and True Blood, and also features on the Saw 2 soundtrack as a remixed version by Uncle. Now, I didn't know this until I was reading the script, despite the fact that I have watched the movie back in the day, but technically I didn't watch the entire movie. You see, me and my friends walked out of this movie a mere 15 minutes into its runtime, pretty much thinking this is a snuff film. It was just disgusting, and I never got into the Saw franchise. Which means of course I missed this song, because I would have picked it up if I had seen the entire movie. An interesting note is that it features guest appearances from ZZ Top's Billy Gibbons on lead guitars and backing vocals, alongside Mark Lanegan, proving to be a great contrast of course to Josh Homme's vocals. It also features a guest appearance by Jack Black performing hand claps throughout the piece. Huh, how about that? I mean, the only thing you'd have to do is add a triangle and you would be one step above Jack Black's guest appearance. Oh wait a minute, someone actually added triangles to this and was a guest appearance? Wow, I don't even know what to say about that. This would be Billy Gibbons' only appearance on the standard version of the album. However, he did record 2 more songs with Quotza with the tunes Like a Drug and a cover of his own song Precious and Grace, which can be found on the UK and Japanese deluxe editions of this record. Precious and Grace, everything's alright. And this is one of many songs that features themes of folklore, which are an overarching theme on this record. What can I say other than
perfect? Everything, down to the last minute details.
This tune shows us why Josh Homme is a master at blending melody with hard rocking riffs, and is one of many pieces in the Queens of the Stone Age catalogue that began its origins with the Desert Sessions recordings, appearing on volumes 9 and 10, as the title In My Head or Something. I never knew the Desert Sessions versions until much later, and instead recognised the appearance of this tune in another piece of media, like many others my age I'm guessing, within the soundtrack to Need for Speed Underground 2, which I want to take a moment to give a shout out to as being one of the best soundtracks for a video game, along with Burnout 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, and of course the GTA series. And yes, we can't forget about Guitar Hero, but of course Guitar Hero was going to have a great soundtrack. The band have also denounced the video clip for this song and made public their disdain of it, with Troy Van Leeuwen stating that it looks like a Gap commercial, and Josh Homme going on to say that it was terrifyingly awful after reviewing it. As for why the video clip appears in such a manner, it's because of pressure from the record label and the band being on the road during much of the time, so they were unable or unwilling to push back as much. Disregarding all these minor flaws, it is still one of the best songs in Quotza's catalogue, at least in my head.
I understood that reference.
And I feel nothing. Am I better yet? This poignant lyric is stated by Josh Homme in a frenetic paced song about the fear of going insane, and as one Reddit user stated, was a great way to kick off the second era for Quotza as its lead single from the album. I remember hearing this before the record came out and thinking, damn, the band really have nailed it again, which helps build anticipation for the eventual release of the record. While the single itself is a lot like many of the singles from the band's history in that it didn't get quite the amount of airplay it deserves, it was certainly certainly another solid release from the band and has barely been played in a live setting, which feels rather criminal in my mind as I think this is one hell of a tune. Many believe that this song is written about Nick Oliveri, however Josh Homme came out and mentioned that this is not the fact. I believe this might be a bit of a meta commentary in regards to Josh Homme's lifestyle, as he was rather public with his use of drugs and other substances, and maybe his choices left him isolated, or perhaps paranoid about others. But I'm reaching here, because there doesn't seem to be anything to verify this statement other than my opinion. Drop a comment if you agree or if you think it's about something else. If you've ever travelled to Southeast Asia and bought any DVDs from there in the past 15 years, then you have undoubtedly heard this song being played, even if you don't know the band, because for reasons beyond comprehension, it was used as an intro piece for the Gold vs. Blue DVD advertisement at the start of seemingly every single movie ever produced in that region.
Why should we buy the gold disc original and not the purple disc DVD-R?
Hopefully, if you've never heard of this band and are just finding out now, then it should give you reason to listen to them, and I hold on to hope that I'm the reason you become a fan of their works. Other than this little tidbit of information, there isn't much more to say, other than the band The Main Street Horns were also on this piece, performing the brass sections that can be subtly heard throughout this tune, and it is one great piece despite being a slow waltz of a song, and perfectly breaks up the album from its first half to its second half. I can only imagine the daunting task of being a musician who has to follow up with what might be their most successful and critically acclaimed album in their career while facing the issues of replacing band members during public scrutiny. After all, history is fraught with talent who couldn't overcome these adversities, but there are also success stories too. This album is neither one of these things, however, and while Josh Homme stated in an interview it could have been easy to go back to the studio and write, of course, Songs for the Deaf Part 2, he would rather press forward with his new talent and go blindly into new territory. And I believe in many ways this attitude really worked for the band when they were approaching the new record. After all, they didn't have the pressure to follow up that success with their new one, Part 2, but it also didn't rely on the crutch that was the radio stations tying these songs together. Instead, this album follows a loose narrative of fairy tales and folklore performed in an evil way that only Quotzer can pull off, while at the same time managing to retain a finesse of danceable rock music. It's also rather symbolic for showing a difference between lineups, and like it's more of a statement from the group than anything else. Despite this, I enjoyed the change in music and a fresh take on their sound, entering into a darker territory on tunes like Someone's in the Wolf or Everybody Knows That You're Insane, while still maintaining of course their classic sound on other songs like Medication or Little Sister. Perhaps the album does suffer from a drawn out second half that really does lack pace, with longer songs of course, especially considering how stacked the beginning of this album was with the first 7 tracks on hand, and there's no denying that they are simply amazing. But of course, I guess growing up with this album and listening to it a lot in high school really makes you feel more attached to it, as of course this is the music that I grew up to. So I guess it has a personal connection with me, and I know a lot of friends of mine who also enjoyed listening to this record too around about this time. I guess that's one of the great things you can say about it, is that it brings people together, plus hearing it in other places like video games, of course I pumped many hours into, really helps believe that you are not alone with that bond to a band. When it comes to this album's release, it received mostly favourable reviews and according to Metacritic sits at a score of 78 from 31 professional reviews, with one of the lowest scores coming from Prefix magazine, who stated, "Lullabies is ultimately a demanding, schizophrenic, lopsided album. At its best, it's an elaboration on what Queens have become known for, distinct, droning, melodic, heavy guitar rock. At its worst, it's futile, go-nowhere studio sludge." Meanwhile, over at RateYourMusic.com, the album sits at a score of 3.54 out of 5 from over 11,000 scores. As for me, I think I'm going to give this album a score of 9 million chilies on the spicy scale, with my favourite tracks being Everybody Knows That You Are Insane, Little Sister, Burn the Witch, In My Head, and I Never Came. You know, the more I think about this album in hindsight, the more I have to wonder if outside forces were impacting the band more so than this record impacting others. For one, the group started donning a typical all-black attire, with even Josh trying out dyeing his hair around about this time. Or at least that's how I remembered it. I might be remembering this wrong. And that always struck me as an attempt to somewhat blend in with the emo music scene. I know, that sounds sacrilegious even to say out loud, but it kind of was the truth. Many other big acts who were around for much longer were doing the same thing. The one bonus that came out of the quotes of Bandcamp, of course, after they were riding that wave of success, was that a live DVD and record would also be released shortly afterwards, and this was called Over the Years and Through the Woods, and is a much needed addition to any fan of the band. I guess the record label didn't really feel that this was a success story, however, as this really didn't sell anywhere near as many units as its predecessor. The album even failed to go gold in America, where Songs of the Deaf had, and in England as well as my home country Australia, it was a similar story. Some might view this album as the start of a lull in their careers that would carry on to Era Vulgaris, but I would strongly disagree, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who would say as much about Lullabies To Paralyze either. So I guess this leaves the album in a limbo-like status, where some enjoyed this album and others just felt like it didn't leave quite the impression they desired. I think the ultimate legacy of what this record is how it ushered in a new era for the band, and I guess this is ultimately where we leave the record. If you want to hear more about my thoughts on this album regarding how it is stacked up against, of course, the rest of the catalogue, then make sure to check out my Queens of the Stone Age albums ranking list. But other than that, thank you for checking out this episode of Retro Reviews. Make sure to drop a like if you can, as it helps this video reach more people, and maybe they'll check out Queens of the Stone Age in return. Other than that, stay spicy everyone, and I hope you have a great day. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to us, and stay notified for future music related content, because it keeps our manager happy at the end of the day. We are also on Discord, Instagram, Facebook, and all those other social platforms if you want to check us out. As always, people, you have a great day and stay spicy.